Saudi Arabia is like no other place on earth. It follows an extreme interpretation of Islam that many think has fed the ideology of jihadist groups such as Islamic State. The Al Saud rulers gave their name to the country and rule as absolute monarchs. Punishments can be extreme, including death by the sword. And there are harsh curbs on women. They must cover up in public, and gender segregation is common. Even McDonald's has a separate eating area for single men. But a revolution has begun. It's led not by people on the streets, but by the king's son, the powerful young crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. He's promoting a more moderate form of Islam. He recently lifted the ban on women driving. Cinemas have opened for the first time in decades, and to celebrate the end of Eid, there was even a music festival in Riyadh.
So this place, this evening, is pretty powerful evidence that Saudi Arabian society really is changing fast. Men and women are mingling freely, a concert's about to start. Frankly, it seems like a pretty ordinary evening at a kind of Western fun fair. When I was here 2.5 years ago in Saudi Arabia, concerts were forbidden, there were no cinemas, and there were certainly no women driving.
I'm going on a road trip to find out what a more moderate Saudi Arabia would mean for the rest of the world.
I remember very well when I got my driver's license. I was 17, almost 18. Being able to borrow my parents' car really did give a sense of freedom. I can just imagine what it must be like for Saudi women who are driving for the first time.
Saudi women are well educated. They account for 60% of university graduates. But strict social conventions limit their prospects. Only 20% of women work, compared with 80% of Saudi men. This is Noor Shabib. She was the first Saudi woman to work as an engineer in oil drilling. Today, she is driving in Riyadh for the first time.
This is so surreal. I have a terrible sense of direction. I'm going to be very dependent on Google. But no, I'm very excited.
In a country with limited public transport and a very hot climate, cars are necessities. Before the ban was lifted, Noor had to employ a driver to take her to work. But many Saudi women cannot afford that luxury.
For people who couldn't afford drivers, presumably that means that they can now work in a way that working was much harder before.
Being able to drive and having the choice to do so will develop women to be more responsible and mature, and therefore more ready and attractive to employers to hire.
So for me, Saudi Arabia has always been somewhat paradoxical in that it is full of extraordinarily well-educated women, and yet it has one of the lowest rates of female labour participation in the world. That suggests there's huge untapped potential in this country.
We'll get there, but I think that the message across the board has been very positive, has been very encouraging, has been very empowering, and so I think it's just the first step on an excellent path.
One reason for the Crown Prince's social reforms is economic necessity.
For decades, Saudi Arabia has been an oil-rich country whose people have essentially lived off the fat of oil revenues. More than 80% of government revenue comes from oil, and if you look forward a few years, that's just simply not sustainable.
Oil prices are volatile, and the government can no longer afford its wasteful system of easy public sector jobs, mostly reserved for men, and generous benefits and subsidies. One solution is to get more women into work, and that means easing social restrictions on them. But there is a worrying dark side.
There really has been genuine social reform in this country. That this change is very top-down. It's driven by the Crown Prince, it's driven by the royal family, but sad irony is that even as this modernisation drive is taking place, he has become even more autocratic, and frankly the place has become more repressive. Several of the women who have been campaigning for greater rights for women were recently arrested and locked up. We tried for this film to talk to on camera several people who have been in the past critical of the regime, and no one wanted to talk to us.
Arrests and death sentences have risen sharply under Prince Mohammed. Over 60 executions have been carried out this year alone. Yet the prince seems popular, especially among the young, in a country where 70% are under 30. But will that last?
So we're looking at a young generation who has come back mostly from scholarships abroad, new ideas, fresh ideas, and with an understanding of something that they've learned abroad culturally that they would like to see implemented here.
Hoda Al-Halaisi was one of the first women to join the Shura Council, which advises the government.
What's the most likely thing that could go wrong?
Frankly speaking, I think that if the aspirations of this younger generation, who have all their hopes in what we all consider to be a great leader, if their aspirations are not answered and if they are impatient, that could backlash. That's my worry.
The world has every interest in the success of the Crown Prince's reforms. If he can show that Saudis can be modern, productive, and good Muslims, it will help spread stability in the region and more moderate Islam across the globe. But Prince Mohammed is making enemies. Religious Puritans don't approve of his social reforms, and some princes resent his power grab. Rumours of coups swirl around Riyadh. That might explain the greater political repression. And yet, democratic reforms could help. They would allow the prince to use his new popularity with the young and women to create a new support base. So far, though, there's no sign that he will ever go that far.